Wow, just as I think things are going to slow down when it comes to news for the Nintendo Switch 2, as we're getting really close to the system, I mean, we're less than a month away, we are getting news left and right today. Today was a very big deal if you care about the power of the Nintendo Switch 2, because the things that have come out today, it's actually pretty crazy. Honestly, I don't even know where we start with this video, but you already know what I'm about to say, except I'm actually changing it up a little bit. If y'all could do me a huge favor, we uploaded yesterday's video super duper late. It was out of both me and Coleman's control. If y'all could do us a favor, give that one a watch, because a lot of people probably didn't see it because of how late it was uploaded. It was out of our control, and we're trying to continue our streak of uploading every day until the Switch 2 comes out. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we'd greatly appreciate it. It'd be nice to hit 18,000 subscribers before I go to New York City at the end of the month for the Nintendo Switch 2, where we're going to be camped out, filming every day, vlogging the Switch 2 line at New York City in front of the Nintendo store. It's going to be an absolute blast. But y'all don't care about anything I'm saying. Let's jump right into the news. Okay, so this one was really exciting. I've been hyping up the curator's voice every week. We've been getting stuff on Nintendo Switch third-party games every single week. And this week's episode was on Final Fantasy VII Remake. And there is a lot of interesting tidbits to get from that video. I highly recommend you check out that video because they give a lot of indication about the power of the Nintendo Switch 2, talking about how if you've already developed for the Switch 1 before, developing for the Switch 2 is even an easier process. It talks about how much powerful the Switch 2 is. And they even talk about how Final Fantasy VII Remake is the perfect game for the Nintendo Switch 2. We even saw more footage of the game, which this game looks absolutely brilliant. Like I've said before with these third-party games for Switch 2, the only time that you can tell that you're playing something on the Switch 2 is when you pay attention to the hair, which is something that I noticed with Cloud's hair. That is literally the only thing that I noticed that was like, oh wow, okay, this is kind of obviously different from the other versions. This game is looking absolutely fantastic on Nintendo Switch 2. They did not give a release date, but it is expected to come out probably within the holiday of this year. The wording that is used in this video makes it indicate that we are getting the whole Final Fantasy VII Remake series onto Nintendo Switch 2. There's interesting wording that is being used into the video, and I highly recommend you check it out. It makes it seem like we're getting more Final Fantasy VII stuff from Square Enix. I think it's going to take a bit for us to get like Part 3, for example. I expect Part 2 to actually come out next year for the Switch 2, but I'm guessing that PlayStation has some sort of exclusive deal where they get to have the game for 1 year. So whenever Part 3 comes out, I'm expecting that wait a year later and it will come to Switch 2. I also thought it was really cool that they give a shout out to Smash Bros. They talk about how Cloud and Sephiroth are playable characters into Smash Bros. And they're hoping that the two universes of fan base will be able to connect. So they're hoping that a lot of the Smash Bros. Players will be picking up Final Fantasy VII for the Nintendo Switch 2. I can't wait for next week's Curator's Voice episode because it is going to be on Hyrule Warriors, which we honestly don't have much information on, and I expect we're going to get a lot more details from that. So definitely stay tuned for next week's Curator's Voice. And also, I think another thing to point out with this is I think this shows that we're going to get a lot of Square Enix titles onto Nintendo Switch 2, considering how well the developer talked about the power of the system. Like I said, definitely check out the video because honestly, it gives you an interesting look of the Switch 2's hardware. All right, let's talk about Elden Ring for the Nintendo Switch 2. Bandai Namco has actually confirmed that it does come with the DLC, but even more content into the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game. There's 2 new classes, and there'll be 2 of the 4 new armors in the game. There'll be new weapons and skills included. I feel like it is possible we might get some sort of costume, something Nintendo related into the Switch 2 edition of this game. But I think it's exciting to see that we're getting the DLC and more onto the Switch 2. We also talked about how we think that Bandai Namco might not be doing game keycards. So I feel like we're going to get some news soon regarding pre-orders and the release date of Elden Ring for Nintendo Switch 2. And once we get that information, that's probably when we'll find out the release of this physical edition, if it's going to be all on cartridge or a game key card. Okay, I wanted to talk about this in case you guys pre-ordered through Walmart. You might want to check every now and then, because it is coming out to be that Walmart has started canceling Switch 2 pre-orders, which is unfortunate, but I kind of expected this to happen. As I told y'all before in my pre-order guide video, is that Walmart is known for canceling orders. The most interesting thing about this is that they've started to cancel now rather than a few weeks ago. So definitely keep checking on your email and your Walmart app to see if the order is still valid, because it might be just them trying to figure out who are the scalpers, the bots that pre-ordered more than one. Just keep checking, make sure that yours don't get canceled. That way you can have a plan to get something else through a different store. We have a lot of Cyberpunk news. CD Projekt Red actually commented on how important it was to them to get Cyberpunk 2077 all on cartridge. I'm gonna quote what they say here. Nintendo at physical retail is still strong, and retail is, in general, not going anywhere. I don't think we'll soon experience a reality where we're just having all games digital. But again, it's especially important for the Nintendo audience. We maybe could have gotten away with it, but is there a point? The right thing to do was to have it out on cartridge with a plug-and-play experience. Do not underestimate the physical edition. It's not going anywhere. And Nintendo players are very appreciative of physical editions that are done right. Honestly, I think that's exciting to see that CD Projekt Red realizes the importance of this. And honestly, I feel like they're one of the few third-party developers that have gone all out when it comes to Nintendo. The Witcher 3 is all on cartridge, even the DLC. Cyberpunk 2077 is going to have everything, even the DLC, onto the cartridge, on a 64 gigabyte cartridge, I should say, which is already expensive. CD Projekt Red is more than likely not going to be making much money off the Nintendo Switch 2 physical edition, but it's exciting to see CD Projekt Red talk about how important it was to have a true physical release out there. And they even went as far as to talk about the process of porting Cyberpunk 2077 onto Nintendo Switch 2. They called it not a gigantic effort, which I think is exciting to see, because a lot of us thought that that was going to be a pretty difficult task to do, considering how this game runs on last-gen consoles and the Steam Deck for that matter. I want to go ahead and quote what they say here. We were absolutely looking at that. We wanted to make sure that it plays right, and it would be very apparent very early if Switch 2 is not capable of running this game of this scale. There's always a thinking in the back of their head of whether people are going to compare it to or expect the PC level of performance. But again, with our Witcher 3 experience, players in general are, I don't want to say forgiving, but understanding of platforms' performance limitations, and they tend to not maybe expect an experience like they're used to on most capable platforms out there. It is a big AAA RPG on the go. We want to make sure that you can play it from start to finish without making any major compromises, and I think we've managed to do that. This article talks about how CD Projekt Red supporting the Switch 2 out of the gate is absolutely fantastic, which I agree. Having Cyberpunk as a launch title, I really think shows how great the Switch 2 is going to be with its power, especially since CD Projekt Red and Square Enix have talked about how powerful this system is and how they're surprised at how their games are running. And having something like Cyberpunk not taking much of an effort compared to something like Witcher 3, that probably was a process compared to Cyberpunk. Even if we had something planned, I cannot tell you right now. But what I can tell you is that we will surely be looking at the platform. I'm expecting it to share at least the similar level of success as the Switch 1. Maybe at some point we'll be there in the future. It's impossible to ignore. We have big AAA games that are on the way, and the biggest focus right now is to develop them and make them available to players. But of course, the Switch will remain at the center of our focus as well. So it sounds like CD Projekt Red has a pretty good chance of putting more titles onto the Switch 2. I think the big one that everyone's going to be wondering about is there going to be a Witcher 3 Nintendo Switch 2 edition? Is there going to be the Witcher 4 coming to the Nintendo Switch 2? That's obviously the next big project from CD Projekt Red, so it does make you wonder. I do think at the very least they're going to update the Witcher 3, but we will see what comes out of that into the future. All right, this one was pretty interesting. This one comes from Nintendo Today. They actually showed footage of how many icons there will be available for the Nintendo Switch 2 at launch, and it is going to be double. They've pretty much brought back all of the Nintendo Switch 1 profile pictures, but there have been some noticeable ones that went away, like some certain Zelda ones, for example. And there's some new additions now, like they're adding Pokemon as a option, and they went all out with the Pokemon. You can use any starter, which I think is kind of crazy. And then they have a bunch of Fire Emblem. They have a lot more Animal Crossing. There is a lot of new stuff here. Definitely should check out that video because there's a lot. And there's one thing that I feel like I have to point out, and maybe this is me coping, but they have a lot of ARMS profile pictures in there. It makes me wonder, is ARMS 2 in development?
Is ARMS 2 in development? I don't know. All of these icons are being added to the Switch 2. Is ARMS 2 in development? Or have these just been on the Switch since, I don't know, 7 years ago because nobody cares about ARMS and not even Mr. ARMS knew that these were on the Nintendo Switch? Is ARMS 2 in?
I thought it was kind of weird that out of all first-party games Nintendo could give a Switch 2 update, ARMS is one of those games. I know there's other games on that list that are getting free updates, but I thought it was interesting that ARMS was on there. I think it's interesting that the ARMS profile pictures are still an option on there. Makes you wonder, is ARMS 2 gonna happen? I'm telling y'all, ARMS 2 is happening for the Nintendo Switch 2. I cannot wait for this. I don't know, I might just be coping. Let me know what y'all think about that. And what profile picture do you guys plan on having? Okay, this is our last story. I feel like we have to talk about this. Obviously, let's put the tinfoil hat on as we talk about this because this is something that is kind of out there, but I think it's a fair conversation to have. GTA 6 trailer has just dropped this morning, and, I say this morning, is I think later in the day, but the trailer too dropped, and it showed the consoles that was available to play this system on, which obviously was going to be PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. What's been very interesting is they are saying that there will be a Series S version of GTA 6. And it's led people to wonder, is it possible that GTA 6 could be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2? Because obviously the Series S is very, very, very similar in power of the Switch 2, and in some ways the Switch 2 is more powerful in certain aspects. So it's had people wonder, if they're developing this, is it possible that something with the Switch 2 could happen? Let's talk about this. This is probably not going to happen, I'm going to be honest. I think what's going to end up happening with the Xbox Series S version, because so many third-party developers for Xbox has talked about how doing things for the Series S has made things impossible to develop. I mean, I remember Rocksteady talking about it, and there's so many developers that's talked about how they hate the Xbox Series S. And looking at how advanced this game is going to be, at least what we're expecting it to be, I would not be surprised if the Xbox Series S version of GTA 6 ends up getting canceled. I just know that developers have talked about how difficult it is to develop for the Xbox Series S, and I feel like it's not out of the ordinary if we see something get canceled. I feel like this could happen, but who knows? If it does end up happening on Series S, I think it is a very fair discussion to have, and honestly a pretty good chance of seeing this game on Switch 2 if a Series S version happens. I know that Take-Two has already talked about how they are heavily impressed with the Nintendo Switch 2 and want to really develop for this system, which we've already seen with 2K. They've had a lot of their games come over. As of right now, we've seen no Rockstar games, but we know that Red Dead Redemption 2 is heavily rumored for the system. And depending how that looks and runs on the Switch 2, I think it's a fair conversation to have. I know Red Dead 2 is a totally different game, but if a Series S version does happen for GTA 6, it's a fair conversation. It's an out there conversation. We have the tinfoil hat on, but I would definitely love to know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. I feel like with everything we've talked about with power today, where Square Enix was talking about the power of the system, CD Projekt Red was talking about the power of the system, I think it's a fair conversation. I don't think it's something something that is impossible now, to be completely honest. Guys, that's everything I have for you. I definitely want to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know. I think there's a lot of interesting things from this video that we had, and honestly, some news stories that I just wasn't expecting. And I know for next week, I'm very pumped, but definitely want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments down below. Guys, make sure to like the video, check out the Twitter, check out the Discord server, check out the Instagram, P.O. Box, Monado Marine membership, $5 a month. Did I do everything? Wait, no, I didn't say I was talking for too much. I've been talking for way too much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. That was a really weird outro. Kind of want to redo that, but it's fine.